So what you're looking at here is the main effort of the Russian army advancing into combat yesterday. That's not exactly what I expected in 2025, but as silly as some of this looks, it's actually a pretty effective means of transporting troops in a drone-saturated battlefield. In fact, when this clip came out just yesterday, showing Russian forces moving into the Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk, Russian war correspondent Two Majors talked about this, saying, quote, "This is what the war looks like now. Numerous drones make it impossible for a large number of infantry and equipment to advance. Infiltration, accumulation, actions by 2 to 3 people, and drones. On both sides, there can be up to 50 drones per assault pair, not counting mortars and artillery." So a couple thoughts there. We saw a few days ago a Russian soldier targeted and struck by 7 different Ukrainian FPV drones in a very short period of time. It looks like he got up and ran away, maybe lived, I don't know, maybe he died in the tree line. 7's a lot to deal with, but it gives you an idea of the drone density overhead. If Ukraine is spending 7 drones on one soldier, imagine what they're putting towards a tank or an armored vehicle or even a pickup truck full of infantry. That's the reason that we haven't seen large-scale armored pushes, and you're seeing small infiltration tactics of 1, 2, 3 soldiers at a time. In fact, a couple weeks ago, Russia did, seemingly out of nowhere, kind of kick off a couple platoon, company, even battalion-sized armored assaults. It was shocking. The results were as expected. Most Russian vehicles were destroyed, swarmed by Ukrainian drones, some cases taking 10 or more hits to actually be destroyed, but they were. Those that weren't destroyed, looks like they took quite a bit of damage, and all of the infantry, from what we can tell, that were dropped off anywhere near the objective were pretty quickly identified and eliminated by additional drones. And a key takeaway from that, as we get into this fog-looking setup yesterday, is those vehicles were easily spotted from a long ways away, easily tracked across the battlefield. Now, the armor helped, a couple more hits needed than for a pickup truck, but Ukraine saw these coming from a very, very long distance away. Something to keep in mind here. Two Major says, so the footage of movement in the fog is characterized by an unusually large number of people and equipment to the front line. Although even the word line is already inappropriate here. It is a strip about 20 kilometers deep in both directions, and here the fog allowed movement. The drones were blinded. Now, there are thermal imagery capabilities with some drones, not all. More on that here in a minute. He says, regarding the equipment, all of it is sawed off and without doors, so it's not a pity. So that at any moment you can jump out, abandon it, and continue to carry out the combat mission no matter what. Our vehicles put on evacuation often last from a day to a week. There's extremely high drone density. In fact, just today we saw a video of a Russian armored vehicle with the doors taken off, like the typically armored doors taken off of the armored vehicle and replaced with some kind of rubber matting. And the idea there being that in the case of a drone attack, if needed, the soldiers can quickly jump out of that vehicle. Because a lot of these, depending on the munition, it might be able to survive 1, 2, 3 strikes. But again, if we look at those attacks from just a couple weeks ago, some of those tanks were taking 5 drone hits in the matter of 10, 15 seconds. So once you're spotted in one of these vehicles and the drones start coming in, you don't necessarily want to be inside of it, even if it is an armored vehicle. Two Major says, yes, we want to see new armored personnel carriers and buggies and everything else in this footage, but this is what the war looks like now. And it's good that the guys still had these vehicles, otherwise they might have to carry everything themselves. Because just a couple weeks ago, we showed this from the Ukrainian perspective, where soldiers from the 25th Airborne Brigade were having to infill for tens of kilometers on foot to move supplies in and evacuate the wounded out. So this issue of drones saturating the battlefield and having to rely on soldiers moving on foot or at best unarmored vehicles is not unique to the Russians. This clip is showing the Russian perspective, but we've shown in countless videos the same situation applied to Ukraine. In fact, we fundraised for the 25th Airborne a couple months ago where they said we need 1 set of night vision and 1 pickup truck. And from the span of saying what they needed, and we raised the funds 7 days later, they said actually we had like 2 or 3 more trucks destroyed in the last couple days. That's the lifespan near the front, especially near Pokrovsk. Everything moving gets hit. Now, a quick note on the thermal imagery, because I know folks will say, well, in rain, a lot of times drones can't fly at all. So it's not a matter of the camera, it's that they can't be airborne. So that's one aspect. Artillery still works, which is why artillery is still very relevant on the modern battlefield, not weather dependent. But in fog, of course, the drones can fly, but they can't see very well. So there are plenty of drones that have thermal capabilities, but not all. that costs a lot of extra money. And we're talking about sometimes, again, 50 drones being airborne at a time for one dedicated little unit operating out there. Way too expensive for every one of those to have thermal imagery capabilities. So some do, and I'll show on the screen here the difference of a standard camera versus a thermal camera looking at the same target. That can help. But again, not every single drone going up is going to be able to effectively identify targets. So in a situation like this, where there is fog, Russia and Ukraine take advantage and do whatever they can to move men and equipment around the battlefield. In fact, we just yesterday or the day before got a clip of Ukraine utilizing a tank in the middle of Rudinsky. So to give you an idea of where Rudinsky is, we'll pull up a map here. This is the Pokrovsk pocket, and we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about what's going on in here today. Some recent developments in here to the north, and then actually Zaporizhzhia to the west looks to be in a pretty tough spot. But Rudinsky is right here to the north. So zooming in, this is deep state map. We've got Pokrovsk here in the middle. Starting to see some infiltrations, Russian infiltrations into the city. Nothing new there. Rudinsky here. The question for this town is that it sits along this northern approach. So Ukraine wants to hold it to allow for infill and exfil from this route. Russia, in our video yesterday, was just talking about how important it is to take this and sever this northern line of communications. So what was notable was just a day or so ago, we got this clip showing that a Ukrainian tank was operating in broad daylight, moving through Rudinsky, engaging Russian targets. Again, a little bit of fog, just enough fog to make it viable for a tank to be out in the open, because without that, they're spotted a long distance away and essentially swarmed by Russian drones, or in that case, by Russian drones when the Russians are advancing by Ukrainian drones. Now, a couple more updates here on Pokrovsk. Military correspondent Alexander Kotz kind of trying to tamp down expectations right now, saying maybe don't think that there's going to be just an absolute ton of prisoners or Ukrainian soldiers killed in this encirclement. He said, quote, "I urge you not to rely on the figure of 5,000 after the liberation of Pokrovsk. There will not be that many prisoners. This is not Azovstal. Most will die and be transported in refrigerated trucks. Some will slip through by luck, taking advantage of the weather, and soon they will find themselves in a new encirclement." And we are starting to see a little bit kind of walking back on the Russian side of exactly what to expect around Pokrovsk. Strangely, earlier today, there was this AI clip. I'll play it here. It's AI. This is fake. And it was presented across a number of very, very large Russian Telegram channels, suggesting that this was Ukrainian forces evacuating from Pokrovsk. So we've got some saying, well, actually, there's not as many there as we thought there might be. Others saying it's going to take a little longer than expected. And others still sharing AI footage of the surrender that is supposedly ongoing in this area. Now, turning to the Ukrainian perspective of the fight here, the 25th Brigade put out some more footage showing their ongoing operation, saying, quote, "In the Pokrovsk direction, the occupiers are pressing with a large number of personnel. They usually move in groups of 3 or try to fly in on motorized transport. Our drone operators of the Unmanned Systems Battalion launch dozens of drones into the sky every day and strike the occupiers approaching Pokrovsk." And going back to that fog footage, actually, there was another clip circulating today, supposedly showing that same path, that same road moving into Pokrovsk with a lot of burned out vehicles on it. The suggestion was that a lot of what we were seeing in that fog video to start today's video, that a lot of those were targeted and destroyed as they approached Pokrovsk. I don't know. All right. Every single road leading to Pokrovsk is covered with bodies. Every single road leading to Pokrovsk has burned out vehicles of every shape and size in every ditch along the way. So maybe, but I felt like it was worth at least bringing up that this was something that was circulating earlier. Now, quick update on our fundraiser. We're working with Zynga's Paw to help pick up some interceptors for the 429 Separate Unmanned Systems Regiment Achilles. So these are the interceptors that are used to bring down Shahed drones that are targeting civilians or military targets, depending on the location. They're bringing down recon drones, and Achilles actually brings down FPV drones as well, targeting military personnel near the front. We're at $21,000. We picked up like $7,000 overnight because you all are awesome. And part of that, I think, was an interview that we just did with a couple of the interceptor pilots. I think people connect really well with that. I mean, these are just guys that want to be doing anything else than fighting this war. In fact, at the end of that interview, and I'll link it in the description below, we had a question from some of our patrons. What do you guys want to do when the war is over? And they said, we can't think about that right now. We have to focus on doing our job right now, and that's something we'll deal with when the time comes. And I think, there's a lot to be said for these just normal guys, right? Just normal like you and me, stuck in the middle of this war, and we're doing what we can here to try to get them more interceptors to protect their men and their fellow citizens. So for those interested and able, the link to contribute will be in the description below. Be sure to add Achilles in the note so we can track our progress as this campaign is ongoing. Now, shifting back over to the map here to give you an idea of the area just north of Pokrovsk, an update again from two majors here. This was a major Russian push a couple months ago, since has largely been cleared out in the Zaporizhzhia area by Ukrainian forces. Two majors talking about this protrusion, he calls it, quote, very stubborn Ukrainian counterattacks are underway. The number of drones concentrated on both sides has long exceeded the number of infantry, and this is not only about FPVs. One position in the forest strip can change hands 3 to 4 times a day, and the next day it's already a gray zone. Neither a position nor a piece of forest strip. With good visibility, movement is very difficult. In poor visibility, there is simply mass migration in the fog. Real quick, did you catch him say that there are more drones than infantry? Think about that with how war is progressing. All right, that's unique to this area. I wouldn't say there's more drones everywhere than infantry, but in this specific area here, that is absolutely wild. He says, because of these features and the huge saturation of drones, the entire line of combat contact represents a huge number of penetrations. Surrounded positions supplied by air and fortified and bare forest strips no longer provide any reliable cover. Everything around the settlements is being built up. Again, we've long seen evidence that Russian forces have been surrounded here and are being resupplied by air. Very early on, because they were moving in groups of 2 to 3, it looked like there were a fair number of kind of pockets of Russian resistance. And we did see a lot of Russian media channels kind of balk at that and say, they're not there. There's no indication they're there. Really, from the very beginning, some of these more reliable Russian war correspondents have talked about the aerial resupply of those units. So we know they're there, and we know there still are some there that are being continually ground down by Ukrainian forces. Now, most of the attention right now, understandably so, is on the Pokrovsk sector, but that's not the only area across the front that is under pretty significant Russian pressure. Zaporizhzhia is an area we need to talk about here briefly. Ukrainian President Zelensky just a few hours ago said, quote, the most attention is now in the Pokrovsk direction in the Zaporizhzhia region, where the Russians are increasing the number and scale of assaults. The situation there is difficult, partly due to weather conditions that favor attacks, but we continue to destroy the occupier. The situation in Kupiansk is a bit easier. Our warriors have results, and this has been a trend for several weeks. So to show you real quickly the few different areas here, and we're going to focus on Zaporizhzhia, we've got Pokrovsk here in the middle of the screen. When we zoom out and move up, you'll see Kupiansk here at the northern portion of the screen. For all of the Russian talk of taking that city and surrounding Ukrainian forces, really hasn't materialized. In fact, we've heard more positive news from Ukraine out of Kupiansk in recent weeks than Russia. I'm not sure we have an entirely clear picture of what's going on there. But shifting back down southwest, this sector of the front in Zaporizhzhia, what you're going to see is a pretty significant push. I'm going to start on the map here to show you how much this has changed hands just in the last couple days. So again, going from the first, watch this progress here to the east by Russian forces. You see them moving relatively quickly there to today. So shifting over to a couple different assessments here, starting with Deep State Map, so Ukrainian source. They say the latest update shows significant increase in the gray area of the Zaporizhzhia region along this area here. Eastern side of the map, near Solodotki, Rivenopolia, and to the north of Huliopol. No way I got those right. They say the enemy has increased its presence in the area of these settlements with constant monitoring throughout the entire gray zone. In particular, the enemy has managed to fully occupy the settlement of Uspinivka. So just here in the middle of the screen. Unfortunately, the enemy's numerical superiority is evident, and control over a significant part of the territory is in question, which may threaten Huliopol. So if we zoom out, you can see how this area here kind of could be, Russia could be coming in from a couple different directions. It appears they've been trying for a while from the south and have not been able to make that progress. And one of the concerns is if they do continue to push from the east and from the south, we could, of course, see that the salient forming around this area, starting to close off more of the Zaporizhzhia region. Two Majors says, quote, assault units of the 104th Motorized Rifle Regiment of the 125th 7th Division of the 5th Army, immediately after liberating the settlement of Novoy, decisively drove out the enemy. In fact, we did see some footage that appears to be from this area showing Ukrainian soldiers surrendering, being taken prisoner by Russia. Two Major says, under the pressure of the warriors, the enemy cannot maintain the integrity of its defense and is forced to retreat further and further towards Huliopol. The enemy lost 2 platoons of personnel and more than 9 units of equipment. So again, a lot of the focus on Pokrovsk, understandably so, but this situation in Zaporizhzhia is not great. It does look like we're seeing a little more conventional methods of attack that we've seen throughout more of the war. Lots of artillery, guided bombs, mortars. The drones are there, no doubt, but it doesn't appear they're there in the same volume that we're seeing in Pokrovsk. It does look like for as many resources as Russia has poured into Pokrovsk, Ukraine has as well. So we'll see what they have to be able to try to backstop Zaporizhzhia. But that's all we got for now. Of course, for those able and interested, the link to contribute to our ongoing fundraisers in the description below. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.